the new EP, for anyone who hasn't heard it yet, which is pretty much everyone, because I'm one of the few blessed ones, right? Fantastic job. But fantastic job on it. Let's talk about it a little bit, because this is a long time in the making. And there's probably a lot of anticipation, a lot of eager energy going on. So let's talk a little bit about the EP, guys.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, just for starters, and not only is John in New York, but Sasha is also in New York right now.
Oh, you relocated to New York?
I also relocated.
Oh, nice, man. Well, we'll have to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so it kind of worked out. We started recording it actually around this time last year, and it had worked out where John was home visiting due to the holidays and just being back in general. We had kind of plotted it out that he was going to come back and do his drum parts. So really, it's been just about like a year-long process. Through that time, in like late spring, early summer, Sasha ended up moving to New York, but he was the second one to record his parts, as he did that right before he had moved. So the timing kind of worked out perfectly with that. And then, of course, Mike, Matt, and myself, we finished off the rest after these two guys were able to do their parts. But I think what was really it was interesting, challenging, fun, very different, and probably something I don't want to ever do again. But we wrote more than half of the record was written independently. So by the time that John went in to record his drum tracks, 3 of the 5 songs I don't think we had ever played with each other before. And I say playing not like live, like even in our practice
sessions, just
right.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a change up for us, but I think it was a different challenge. For the 5 of us, we've all been in bands for such a long time. And, when you're talking about being in various bands throughout, like for all of us, I mean, realistically, like a 10-year period, you're throwing different challenges, obstacles, whatever it may be. But this is something that was just a complete and total anomaly with that, when you're talking about a pandemic like that, where not only do we have 2 of the guys are on the other side of the state, but also it's just difficult to get together in the first place.
Yeah.
So it was tough for the sense of us not being able to be in a room together, because, the 5 of us, when we step into a room, and I know, sure, probably lots of bands say this, but when the 5 of us get in a room together and start playing music, it feels like it's just magic, It's just
absolutely.
Something it's just so much bigger than, the sum of our parts, I guess. It just us being together, it's a totally different animal, and we all feed off of each other's creativity because
it's a slow animal.
Yeah. Well, because of the fact though that we all have such different tastes and everything, like we feed off of that from each other, our different creative styles and energies, and we all love different music, and so it was definitely difficult not being able to have that component of it, but also I think on the inverse of that, it challenged us to really kind of channel a side of us that none of us have ever really had to channel before, which is working on something as a collective unit, but doing so independently.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that aspect of it kind of makes this record unique, that it's all of us and our individual influences, but not as much blended together as the first EP was when we were writing it together. Whereas now it was like one of us writes a part of the song, and then Mike writes a guitar part, and then it's thrown to John, who comes up with a drum part that he's working on by himself.
Yeah.
Then John then sends that to Sasha, and then Sasha comes up with a guitar part that plays off of Mike's part, but they're not able to interact with each other. So it's just going off of our instincts. And then Brock gets his hands on it with his bass parts.
Slapping the bass.
Well, really, yeah. So
slapping the bass.
Right, yeah. So all of us being able to kind of have our own take on it, where it's not as collaborative as it was before, obviously wasn't ideal, but I also feel like it brings out something in all of us musically that we never really had to channel before. And
that does beg the question of, like, without that collaborative nature, like, because it is still obviously a collaborative process. The fact is, you're all needing to be on the same page, and you're all needing to get your desired product out, right? So let's say, for example, you from the example you just gave, where it starts with Mike, he lays down a guitar part, passes it to John, and then John passes it over to Sasha, right, to Matt, and let's say Matt hears Mike's part, and he's like, this needs to change. You know, I think Matt could have done this differently, or I think we should do this part differently. How long is this process? Because I imagine, like, in the same room, we talked about this in the first interview, right? In the same room, there is that energy, and you guys are able to be like, oh yeah, I see what you're saying, and it's like boom, boom, boom. But like when Sasha's listening through this whole thing and trying to add what he wants to it, he adds what he wants, but then also says, hey, we need to change this, and then he's gonna have to go back around, right? Like, this is kind of like an entire circular process multiple times over, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think what's been super helpful with the time between putting time together, our first record, and Chasing Moonlight, the second record, is that we've really dialed in on like a particular sound. If you listen to our first EP, I think it's pretty indicative of the fact that like we were a new band. We were putting out what we thought sounded good at the time, but there wasn't really a unified idea or sound in that way. And moving into the second record, I think we really leaned heavy into a direction, and that allowed for us to kind of synchronize in this virtual world a little bit better than we anticipated. So I think the ideas were a lot more cohesive. And even with, you know, second and third edits on our demos, it was easy to communicate, you know, the changes that had to happen just out of the sheer fact that, you know, we've had more time under tension, and we have, you know, learned what we like and what we don't like. And the communication has just become easy nowadays. Just with like getting over these challenges through the pandemic, and also just growing closer together and being open and honest with each other has been super helpful in getting the ideas across and really honing in on what our sound is becoming.
Yeah. And with that,
I was just going to echo something really quickly.
No, yeah, go on. Absolutely.
Yeah, just to kind of go off of what John was saying, I think the other component of that that's pretty important is having that first record under our belt was pretty huge now, because, you know, we've all, like, through our various musical careers or however long we've been kind of doing this with the whole band thing, you know, we have a lot of experience. We feel confident about each of our individual, you know, instruments and what we all bring to the band. And so, you know, Chad, to your point where you're saying about lending input to like another part or something like that, I think that one of the things that I love most about this band is that we don't necessarily like, we have a very strong and mutual respect for one another and each other's parts and each other's ability to write. But because of that respect, if, you know, one of us says, well, what if we tweak this guitar part a little bit? Or what if we maybe like change this vocal melody to like this run rather than what you had done before? None of us are looking at it in the way where we're letting our pride get in the way and be like, well, no, I don't know about that. You know,
yeah.
We fully hear each other out. And I think that that's something that just in talking like with the five of us and just talking about our prior band experiences, that's something that we've all run into where it's like, well, no, I wrote this guitar part or this bass part, so like this is the way it should be.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, it's like if one of us is like, well, what if you maybe did this a little bit differently? That we don't go on the defensive. It's like, okay, well then let's hear that out and hear how it sounds.
Yeah.
If we like it, then let's roll with it. But if not, then we'll keep it the way it is. So I think just having that flexibility in terms of like how we write and communicate with each other, and you know, I think all of it just kind of comes back to trust. And I think that having the first EP under our belt, and because of the fact that we all believed in it so much, it led to a greater trust between all of us as band members and friends too.
Absolutely.